别忘了给我们的是妈妈吃。
Hello, everyone. My name is Bethany Banal, and I am a school psychologist at Yorktown High School. Today, I'm joined by my colleague, fellow Yorktown school psychologist, Solange Hornbake, and we welcome you to our presentation about student mental health. We are really grateful for this opportunity to share with you information on this very important topic to help you all better understand student stress, mental health, and how to support your child through the ups and downs of adolescence, especially given what we know are some pretty unique challenges presented by our current world circumstances. We know now more than ever it's essential to monitor the well-being of our students and to help them build the coping skills to face the stressors in their lives now and in the future. So without further ado, here's Solange to get us started.
Hi, everyone. My name is Solange Hornbake. I am the other school psychologist at Yorktown High School, and it's a pleasure to be here with you all today. We're so happy that we are able to present this timely information. We know that student mental health is, of course, always important, but especially during these times, as Ms. Banal mentioned. So we're going to go ahead and start our presentation. Today's introduction to student mental health, it's a big topic, but we wanted to present some sort of basic information for you so that you and we can work with your students or your children to sort of monitor their mental health and well-being, to help recognize symptoms and signs of anxiety and depression, how to respond when your student seems stressed, strategies for listening in a way that doesn't inflame the anxiety, how to help and figure out how to help your student, and what to do if you believe your student may be having some suicidal ideation or suicidal thoughts. So next slide, please. Next slide, please.
My apologies. Some technical difficulties here. I'm trying to get the next slide on.
Okay. So Mr. Conroy is working on that. Like I said, I hope that this information is, we hope that this information is helpful to you. Oh, there we go. Okay. So in terms of expectations versus reality, we all balance a lot of things, right? So we have what we want to do, right? So for example, I have a young child and a husband, and obviously I work. So right now, especially, as we're all kind of at home, I'm trying to balance things like helping my young son do his schoolwork, do my own work, being a good wife, being a good mother, taking care of my parents who live nearby, and also, having some time to socialize, be it virtually because we're, like I said, at home, and also kind of keep my sanity, right? And so we're all sort of have these expectations for ourselves, and not everything can kind of come first, right? I know I've struggled with that during this whole time. But then we have reality, right? That's a lot to juggle, and sometimes we're going to drop something. I might not be the best friend one day, or I might, forget to do something for my parents or something like that. So that's what we have. We have what our expectations for ourselves and maybe for others are, and then the reality of just how things are sometimes. Next slide, please. So in terms of monitoring mental health and well-being, we just kind of wanted to give you some basic information. So we know that some stress is normal, right? We're designed to think. Worry as an evolutionary sort of process keeps us safe from perceived threat. So we know about the fight, flight, or freeze, how we react to those perceived threats. Do we stand our ground and fight against whatever it is? Do we flee the situation, or do we freeze and sort of become paralyzed by that stress? it sort of helps us with our preservation of ourselves, of others, or our status as well. You know, whether I'm a good employee, or I'm a good friend, or I'm a good student. So we expect stress to increase in high school. You know, it's a big leap developmentally, and with not only physical growth, but your as part of that is your brain growth too. And we see that there are lots of different things still developing in students who are beginning high school, right? We know that research shows us that the frontal lobe of our brain, which isn't fully developed till age of 25, is where things like organization and impulse control and things like that are all controlled by that front part of our brain. And we see that stress has lots of different factors, right, playing into students. So there's media overstimulation, and that includes social media, increased academic demands, social pressures, you know, peer relationships, competition with other students, other peers, executive functioning development. Like I said, that front part of the brain is just not fully developed yet, and forming your identity, sort of becoming more who you are or want to be. And our mental health is essential to our well-being. So we know that when that sort of starts to break down, it's harder for us to then manage other things that we need to manage, right? So if our mental health, if we're feeling overly stressed, it's going to be hard to stay focused and get work done, and, you know, be in relationships with others and things like that. So our goal is to empower students to strive for that balance, to manage that stress, to develop healthy coping skills, and to feel comfortable accessing support if they feel like they are having a hard time with it. We want to be mindful of the message that we want to present to our students, right? So we see a picture there of a race car or a fast car. And, you know, someone once said to us, it's like having a really a car that's capable of going really fast. But if you rev that engine constantly, that engine's going to break down. So even though something has the potential to go really fast, or to, for example, one of our examples here, to be a straight A student, expectation of that all the time can wear on mental health. So again, being mindful of the message that failure is not an option, or that the student's not reaching their potential, or they've never had to work this hard, again, that they could be a straight A student. It's sort of, you know, that we need to fix whatever that problem is, because there is a problem, that the achievement is the thing to be praised rather than the process of them, you know, learning the skills or learning how to cope. And also that fix versus growth mindset. You know, maybe you're not good at something yet, but that doesn't mean that you can't practice at it and become better at it. So again, being mindful of that message. So this is just sort of a graphic of the things that students are having to balance, and things that are, you know, fueling the stress, right? So again, peer pressure, decision making, especially sometimes with, you know, college coming up, overscheduling, either academically or with extracurriculars, you know, fitting in, trying to keep up, and again, managing their own expectations of themselves, and also what expectations others may have of them. So this is just, the next few slides are just some information about stress and mental health awareness that was gathered via a poll. And as you should be able to see, this poll was taken by 35,878 teens all across the US. And some questions asked were things like, how often are you stressed? What stresses you out most? What are you most likely to do when you're stressed? And what resources do you use to get help? So these are some of the responses. And unfortunately, almost 45% of those who responded said that they were stressed all the time. Another good portion, almost 37%, said they were stressed sometimes, and then rarely came in at about 12% and never at 6%. When asked what stresses them out most, a lot of it was relationships. Next came teachers, and then maybe something else, and then family, college, and then friends. When asked what they're most likely to do when they're stressed, they were most likely to talk to their friends. There's eating. I am guilty of maybe a little stress eating myself these days. And then a few people answered nothing or other, and then some reported working out, and so exercise. And then some did report also using substances to help them with stress. In terms of what resources these students used to get help, again, about 44% said they used apps or online resources. Others reported not doing other or they used nothing. About 5% see a therapist, and then about 2.5% seek school resources, such as Ms. Banal and myself, a social worker or a counselor, for example. When we look at the breakdown of depression and anxiety or behavior disorders by age, you'll see that the 12 to 17-year-olds, so really middle school into high school, has the most significant sort of rate of depression, anxiety, and those behavior disorders. So, you know, this is sort of a bar graph telling us what we see, right? That these kids say are really stressed, and like was shown in one of our earlier slides, there are a lot of factors. And I think factors that maybe some of us growing up didn't have to deal with, right? That constant, you know, the social media and other things like that, that sort of takes those pressures and sort of puts it in your face all the time, right? Anytime you're accessing some of the things, or media, you're turning on the news, and it's a constant barrage of negative information. So in terms of recognizing the signs of anxiety and depression, there are obviously, it's going to be different for everyone, but some of the physical symptoms could be headaches and stomach aches, especially maybe if there's a task that, like a test or a presentation or something that they have to do that day, a racing heartbeat, shortness of breath, shaking and dizziness, nausea, muscle tension, chest pains, changes in sleep and appetite as well. In terms of social emotional signs of anxiety and depression, you'll get excessive worrying, difficulty concentrating, sadness, being indecisive, restless, sort of feelings of fear or dread, feeling overwhelmed and inadequate or out of control. For example, students who might be struggling with a class and feeling like no matter what they do, how hard they study, they're not getting the outcome that they feel like their work has, you know, they're not getting the grade that maybe they thought they would on a test despite studying. Withdrawal from social interactions, avoidance of uncomfortable situations or tasks, again, that fleeing, right? And loss of enjoyment in activities that they previously enjoyed, or lack of motivation, you know, having a hard time getting out of bed, having a hard time starting a task, not knowing where to start a task, things like that. In terms of cognitive signs, some of the things are things like memory difficulties. You're just having a really hard time forgetting something, or retaining information, I should say, so being forgetful. Difficulty sustaining attention to irrelevant information. So maybe their thoughts are racing about something else, and so it's really hard to shift that attention to what they should be paying attention to. Difficulty concentrating, again, lack of focus. Organizing and executing a plan. So what we call, you know, executive functioning, being kind of stuck and very cognitively rigid, that something has to be a certain way, because if it's not, that just, you know, that just spikes the anxiety. Feeling like things have to be perfect, you know, compromised productivity. What maybe took 10 minutes before now takes half an hour. Overthinking something, sort of ruminating on the anxious thought, impaired reasoning, so having a hard time sort of managing that emotion and in order to be able to problem solve. And then having some cognitive distortions or creating distorted, you know, thinking. These are some of the more common thinking errors in teenagers. So things like black and white or all or nothing thinking. So things are either good or bad, perfect or a failure. There's no middle ground. So I either get into that college or I'm a failure. I either have this relationship with this person or I'm not worthy to have a relationship with anybody. Those kinds of thoughts. Catastrophizing, so expecting the worst case from a scenario or a situation. Again, if I don't get the A, I'm going to fail out of the class. Should or shouldn't statements, having those sort of demands and putting pressure on yourself, and and that can lead to guilt and feelings of inadequacy. Filtering, so you take the whatever negative aspect there is to a situation and sort of make that big, and you minimize the positive. So, for example, I will take our lockdown situation. If I were to magnify the stress that I feel working and trying to manage, family demands, but minimize the fact that, hey, I'm also able now to spend more time with my family. That's sort of an example of filtering. Generalizing, so taking one bad event and saying, oh, that means the rest of this is going to be bad too. I didn't do as well on one test as I maybe wanted to, therefore, I'm just going to fail the class. You might also see teenagers personalizing, so assuming the blame for something that they're not primarily responsible for, or you could see them externalizing, blaming others when you are the one who is responsible or for something, or you ignore your role in whatever happened. Minimizing the importance or the impact of something that didn't go well, and then mind reading, believing you know what others think or why others act as they do. And then also emotional reasoning, you're confusing a feeling with a fact, right? I like to say sometimes to kids who I see for counseling, feelings aren't facts. You may feel like you are not a good student, when in reality, you're getting good grades, your teachers are saying wonderful things about your work ethic and how you do in their class. Your parents are proud of you. Maybe some colleges are looking at you for some sports or things like that. So confusing those feelings with facts. Next slide, please. So we want to address some of those cognitive distortions, right? We all do it. We all have these cognitive distortions, and we think things that are not true, and we have feelings that we perceive to be fact. But self-defeating thoughts can lead to negative emotions. If you are constantly going around thinking that you are not a good student, or you're not good at sports, or you're not a good friend, or whatever it is, if you repeat it enough to yourself, or if you hear it enough, it's going to be reality to you, right? And that then can in turn lead to self-defeating actions. I'm not going to be good at this, so why am I going to try, right? And teens lack that life experience. They're young. Again, their brains are still forming. They're still growing. They're still learning coping strategies. They're just learning. So they don't have that life experience to contradict those negative thinking patterns. So what our goal is to be able to help them identify and challenge and restructure those distorted thoughts, and to help them with emotional regulation. And we do that by, modeling it for ourselves. We're not perfect at it. Like I said, I'm a parent, and I get dysregulated when I'm trying to calm down my own son sometimes. It's not perfect, but we try our best to sort of model working through our own emotions and distress and anxiety. We check for distorted thinking and collect evidence to get an accurate picture. So again, some of that pushback and challenge of when a student says, well, I'm not really a great student. Well, let's hold up a second. Here's the evidence to the contrary. And we do that gently. But we challenge the initial thoughts with those factual evidence, Again, focus on the fact. Is that a fact or your feeling? And we challenge conclusions as well. Does all the evidence fit that conclusion? You have thought this, but does all the evidence really fit that conclusion? And encourage maybe other ways to think, get that flexibility of thought. Encourage acknowledging those shades of gray. Not everything is black and white. There is that gray, and then in many shades of gray sometimes even. Or say, how would someone else see it? Would everyone see it this way? Or what would you tell a friend who, whatever? And then hold them accountable. Did you or didn't you do X, Y, and Z? And then reframe the impact. If it happened to me, I might feel so, in such a way. So really, again, addressing those cognitive distortions to help them be more flexible in their thought and, kind of reframe that thinking for them. Okay. So in terms of encouraging mindful responding, we think about the 3 minds, right? We think about that emotional mind, okay, that part of the mind that says, I'm not good at this, I won't ever be good at this, I'm going to fail, whatever it is. We also have rational mind, again, that's focused on the facts, right? And then we have wise mind. And what we want is to get students to get to their wise mind. Obviously, the emotions are natural, but we want to also encourage the use of the rational mind, because together the emotional mind and the rational mind make up that wise mind. So we want to balance, because this is all about balance. Yeah, you have these feelings that are maybe natural because it's human experience, but we also want to be able to sort of, at the same time, use that rational mind so that we can make a good decision about something, right? Instead of maybe giving up on something, maybe we're putting aside our frustration, our anxiety, and using some good coping skills to get through a situation. Okay, next slide, please. Okay. So here's some ways to respond when your student seems stressed. Okay, we want to stay calm, again, modeling that calm. We're going to expect some pushback, right? Teenagers, as we all know, have minds of their own, and they might say, you might try to maybe challenge one of their thoughts, but they're no, but it is this way, it is this way. So expect some of that pushback. Validate them without judgment. And validate really just means that you're open to hearing what they're saying, you're understanding what they're saying. It's not saying to them that, oh, your thoughts are real, your feelings are accurate, or your thoughts are accurate. We're not saying to you, you're not a failure. We're understanding that this is where they are coming from, and this is their point of view and their perception, and we're validating that without judgment. We want to normalize that stress is universal, right? And we want to troubleshoot. We can't remove all the stressors. Avoiding of the stress is risky. Learning some distress tolerance is necessary. It's going to happen in our lives many times over, right? Everyone's going to feel distressed at some point in their lives. And learning to really tolerate that. That you can help them feel understood and empower them to use their problem solving and coping skills. And help them to obtain additional support too, whether that be through school or through private means, and not one size fits all. So what works for one student when they're stressed might not work for another student. Even within a family, siblings might react differently and need different coping skills. And then homeschool collaboration. Like I said before, we have lots of parents who contact us about wanting to just address some concerns, and we're always here to help with that as well. Okay, and then talking about it, some don'ts. So don't avoid, don't shoot down ideas right away. So again, taking time to listen to your child's point of view, engaging them in a meaningful conversation, even if you disagree with what they're saying. Again, this is about being open and listening to them. We're going to avoid making assumptions, judgments, or dismissing their concerns or invalidating the feelings. Things like, don't worry about it, oh, just relax, it's not worth getting this upset over. Things like that. It might not be something that upsets us, but again, it's upsetting to them. Again, they don't have the life experience, right? And saying things like you're only a teenager, or at least, for example, at least you have this when other people don't, something like that. We do have a link down here at the bottom about empathy. I'm not sure if we can also send that link to you as well to have you view it as well. I think we were having some difficulty yesterday when we were trying to get it to play, some firewall issues, but there is that link and we can send that to you as well if you would like it. Okay, slide. All right. So here's some things that we do want to do. Again, staying calm, present and engaged, giving them time to feel ready to talk. So, you might only get bits of information out at a time, or they might just need time to talk in the first place. Ask questions and have that conversation. Can you describe how you're feeling? What do you think is going on? Some students might say, I don't know, I'm just stressed, and sort of almost scaffolding for them to talk about how they're feeling. What do you need from me? And always, I'm here for you. Again, seeing the situation from their point of view and then keeping them in the present. Validate their feelings, reflect back to them. What can we do in the next X number of minutes to help? And then talking openly about mental health, self-care, and potentially seeking some outside supports or private supports if needed. Okay, so now Ms. Banal is going to take over for the rest of the slides, and we're going to be talking next about what to do if you feel like your student might be suicidal.
All right, thank you so much, Solange. That was an amazing introduction to mental health and what we know our teens experience. We're going to transition into a little bit more specific information about if you're concerned that your student is having a suicidal thought or suicidal ideation. We know that suicide is the second leading cause of death among teenagers, and we also know that I think the last I checked the statistic, it's about 17% of students actually think about it. So that's not making an attempt and that's not completing, but that's just kind of having an ideation or having a thought. So, that's almost 20% of our kiddos. So, we really take it very seriously because, essentially when students are having a suicidal thought or communicating something about feeling hopeless in some way, it's usually because they're feeling overwhelmed. They're, sort of completely at a loss as to how to cope with whatever pain they might be experiencing. And it's a cry out, it's communicating a need. So, this next segment is kind of geared towards more specific ways to kind of walk through that conversation with them. So the first step is just kind of looking for warning signs in your student. Obviously saying very specific things like, I want to kill myself or I want to die. Obviously, that's something that we want to take very seriously. I get a little bit more into detail in the next slide, so I'll hang back on that one. But just seeing, some mood swings, some highs and lows that can, kind of get very extreme. If your child is having some really significant changes in routine, not eating, not sleeping, eating too much, sleeping too much, avoiding things that they used to like to do, withdrawing from family and friends, engaging in risky or self-destructive behaviors, kind of essentially seeming like they don't care about themselves anymore, giving things away, or describing kind of themselves as being a burden to the family or a burden to others, a burden to the world. And then, of course, kind of a sense of hopelessness, giving up, or just sort of feeling trapped in the pain that they're feeling. Okay, next slide. Just some general information about risk factors. If a student has an existing psychiatric condition such as depression or anxiety, that is a big risk factor. Family history of mental illness, previous suicide attempts. So the research shows that the more times a student kind of makes an attempt correlates with the likelihood that they have the intent to complete a suicide. Substance use and abuse, bullying issues, interpersonal stressors. So, this is like the number one thing in high school. It's friends, it's dating, it's relationships, it's social media. We know that the kids are just under fire kind of at how to manage all of that. And that can all get to be very overwhelming. So that's something that, we know a lot of our students feel very stressed about. Loss, rejection, or feeling unaccepted. We know students in minority groups, students who may be, questioning gender, sexual orientation, feeling unaccepted, feeling afraid to attempt to gain acceptance can all be risk factors for kind of that sense of isolation from others. Acting impulsive, access to lethal means, So you kind of have to sort of, take note of, your child's ability to have access to materials in the home or outside of the home, barriers to accessing support. So, this can kind of tie into the next one. There's can be a stigma about, accessing mental health support, which can present to a child as a barrier, kind of like, I can't ask for help because it's wrong, or there's something wrong with me if I need this. A sense of shame or a sense of guilt. Those things can kind of all contribute to a student feeling less likely to get help. And then cultural or religious beliefs that kind of, highlight suicide or self-harm as sort of an act of nobility, or that go kind of contrary to what we try to build in students in the sense of coping skills and managing their well-being. Next slide. So of course we have the risk factors, but we also know there's some pretty significant protective factors that we want to help kind of, build in our students. The first one, the strongest one, is connection. So connection to others in the family, connection to peers, connection to members of the community. I think it is the #1 protective factor, is if a student can identify with, one trusted person, one trusted adult that they feel they have a connection with. Next, healthy coping skills and problem-solving skills, being adaptable to change. These kind of all tie back into when Solange presented the cognitive thinking errors, because, when kids are emotional, when they're in that emotional mind, like rational thought just goes out the window, right? So they kind of are impaired in how to think through things logically and rationally, and using that sense of wise mind, kind of acknowledging their emotions, but also balancing that with a problem-solving approach, or what's the next step to help me get through this. Self-esteem and a sense of purpose. We know students who have a sense of these things are less likely to engage in self-destructive behaviors. And then access to effective medical and behavioral health care. So again, if students have the availability and the connection to those resources, that's a huge protective factor for mental health. Next slide. Okay, so what to do if you believe your student may be having a suicidal ideation. So the first step in this, and probably most other conversations, is just understanding where they're coming from. Like Solange said, it really starts with listening and giving them a chance to kind of share their experience. So it's very likely, like I said before, that they may less want to actually die than they want to just kind of, get out of the pain. They want to stop feeling the intense emotional distress that they're feeling, but they don't know how to do that. So their thinking goes to sort of that irrational place, and that takes over their ability to kind of problem solve and walk through the situation a little more rationally. And this is their reality. These are their feelings. They very much do feel a lack of control and unable to cope. So that's where we come in to kind of help build those supports and build those skills for them. Okay, next slide. All right, so the next step in kind of the process, if you think that your student is having a suicidal thought or ideation, is talking about it. And this is not easy. I can tell you from experience, I am not a parent, but this is a part of my job, doing suicide risk assessments, as it is Solange's. And I know at first it feels awkward and it feels difficult. And it's not a subject that people talk about, historically have talked about often or smoothly or comfortably. It's kind of like, well, what do I say? Well, how do I say it? And there's no script exactly for that. I'm going to give you some kind of general pointers, but talking about it is 100% essential. As awkward as and uncomfortable as it might feel, it's really going to help your student kind of relieve that burden that they might be carrying, and establish a sense of connection and understanding, which again is the most important thing. There is a myth that suicide, talking about it, can plant the seed, and if you ask them if they're thinking about it, then they're going to go do it, and that's absolutely not true. In fact, the opposite is true, that starting that conversation can really be the turning point. And once you understand them and they feel that you understand them, then you can work together to talk about next steps and getting help. So of course, you want to take, their comments seriously. What, is maybe easy to see is attention-seeking or dramatic behavior, which we know, teenagers can kind of engage in sometimes, going back to those cognitive thinking errors and, sort of that emotional brain. But in this case, we, 100% want to take what they have to say seriously and go through conversation about it. Okay, next slide. Okay, so talking about it. So these are just some general pointers as to kind of how to, go through that conversation. So, first, you just sort of ask, like, well, what led to this? Kind of, was there a specific incident? And you can say something like, what happened? I want to know more. It might help to talk about it. And again, like Solange said, it's probably going to feel very emotional to you. So just, take a deep breath, hang back, and give them time to be ready to start that conversation. It might not happen instantly, but stay with them and, sort of offer and invite them to share with you. And I think if they perceive it that way, they're more likely to open up. Again, don't invalidate their feelings, again, sort of dismissing things by saying, oh, you should appreciate all you have. There are kids that don't have half of what you have, or I think you're overreacting. Those things could very well be true, but this is their reality. This is their pain and this is their fear. And if they feel that you're downplaying or minimizing it, they're going to be much less likely to share, to try to connect with you, and more likely to engage in behaviors that could potentially be self-destructive to relieve the pain. Encourage them to describe what they're feeling. So again, you can kind of come at it like, I don't know. I didn't know things were so bad for you. Talk to me about what's going on. So really, like, give them the paintbrush and let them paint the picture and just listen. Not judging what they're saying, but basically just showing acceptance. And kind of saying, I had no idea that it was like this for you. I had no idea it was this bad. And reflecting that, you're really hearing them and you're really learning about what it is like to walk in their shoes. Next slide. Okay. So again, it's difficult to balance, I think, being direct and compassionate at the same time sometimes. But, as authentically and lovingly, and empathetically as you can, you just want the messaging to be that, first and foremost is their safety, and you're going to do everything possible to keep them safe, whatever that takes. Explain that you've heard them. So again, sort of reflecting back what you've heard them say. Let them know that you're worried, be clear about your concern for their safety and well-being, but, it's probably tempting and natural to want to overreact and kind of act very emotionally. I come from a Sicilian family, and that you can probably tell I'm talking with my hands. So my mother's side of the family is like 0 to 60. So it can be very tempting to kind of overreact and go into that emotional side out of love and out of concern. But, really kind of balancing that can do wonders for the dynamic while you're having this conversation. And then, of course, provide them with reassurance and unconditional love. The bottom line is you don't want them to feel alone. You want them to feel like you're there. You haven't judged them. You don't love them any less for what they've said. And you're going to help them get whatever support that they need. Okay, next slide. Okay, and again, ultimately safety is priority, so you have to ask if they have a specific plan, if they haven't already stated that in the conversation. And a specific plan indicates a higher risk for action because it shows that they've kind of put some thought into maybe, the means, the method, their intent to do it. They've kind of really like percolated on this for a while. And if they have a very specific or detailed plan, that's a big red flag and you want to get help immediately. So of course, remove or secure any dangerous items in the home and don't leave them alone at the time of crisis. If it's an immediate danger or life-threatening situation, call 911, go to the nearest emergency room. We do have some community resources that are wonderful and families have utilized very successfully. Arlington Behavioral Health Care provides emergency mental health services at that number for psychiatric emergencies, and Children's Regional Crisis Response is actually, they can mobilize to the home for, a mental health crisis in the home. I have additional information on those in upcoming slides. Also, on the APS website, if you go to this link, Emmett, if you could click on the In Crisis Need Help Now link. It's really a wonderful page with just, tons of resources, local and national, in terms of different ways to get help and support with mental health crises and emergencies. Okay, you can go back to the slides. Thank you. Next slide. Okay, so this is a little bit more information on CR2. And again, if we didn't say prior to, we have our contact information on the last slide. So if anyone would like a copy of this presentation so that you have the specific materials, we're happy to send you that if you just send us an email after the presentation. So for the sake of time, I'm gonna kind of just kind of gloss through this just because the information is available on the website. And again, CR2, they're trained mental health clinicians. They provide wonderful support both over the phone, they mobilize to the home, and they're very responsive and supportive, especially in connecting families with like case management and additional resources. And again, the goal of a mental health crisis is you want to secure the student, you want to make them safe, you want to help them feel understood, and you want to sort of engage them in a process where they have buy-in to some next steps in terms of support and help. And they're wonderful at helping with this. Next slide. Again, more information about behavioral health care services available through the county. We also know that they take same-day access appointments. Those are conducted virtually and over the phone right now. The information is right there, but that's a very wonderful resource because you can get kind of connected with someone, the same day that a situation might arise. Next slide. And again, these are just some, if maybe your child hasn't necessarily said something specific that worries you, but you just kind of want a little bit more information. Of course, we are always available, but there are, a number of hope lines, lifelines, hotlines that have trained counselors that are available to kind of talk through what to do and can connect you with additional resources. So there's that information. Next slide. This slide again has the information for all of the APS school-based mental health teams at the secondary level. Every school, every high school, we all have school psychologists, social workers, school counselors, and substance abuse counselors. So if you visit the page, on your own time, you can get all of our contact information by school through that page. And again, if there's something concerning you in the home, we really encourage homeschool collaboration because, we want to be as best support to your student as possible. And oftentimes school is a huge source of stress for them. I know Solange and I have meetings, daily with families and students. And I think for me, in my experience, the number one thing I hear that's helpful for students is just being heard and knowing people know what's going on, because then, it's not this isolated thing that they're carrying and, they're sort of unsure of what to do with. I know we have wonderful, understanding, caring teachers that want to know their students on this level and want to know what they need in terms of how to support them. Not just academically, but emotionally as well, because we know you can't you can't take one apart from the other. They're all tied together. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the remainder of the slides are kind of some specific information and resources in terms of just some things that families, parents, and students can do and can access at home in terms of good coping resources and coping strategies. So, you know, of course, just establishing some basic good habits. And I feel like this always sounds so simple, but it's really kind of hard. You know, making sure we eat a healthy, balanced diet. You know, in the age of convenience and lack of time, it's really often hard to do that. But there's a wonderful article, I think it was a study published by the National Institute of Health that really showed the correlation between an unhealthy diet and an increase in mental health, likelihood of mental health problems. And then the reverse was true, that maintaining sort of healthy habits minimizes the risk in some ways of developing mental health problems. Drinking water, avoiding caffeine, sleep is one that we know probably most of us as adults and our kids struggle with. The recommendation is 10 to 12 hours, 10 to 12 screenless hours. And that is, I think it's amazing what we see in our students when they actually start to kind of get that routine. Especially now being on the screen so much of the time, it's so important to kind of have that separation and rest visually and of course for the whole body. So exercising, spending time outside, we know the benefits of vitamin D on our mood, exploring mindfulness, practicing deep breathing, spending time on enjoyed activities and trying new ones. Establishing parameters around screen time. You know, I know we hear all the time the phone can be a fight. Kids are required to be on devices right now. So it's really a conversation about involving your student in, getting their buy-in, you know, giving them some ownership of what they think is reasonable, what you think is reasonable, and coming up with something that that works for the family. And then talking about it. I have some more resources coming up just in terms of some family activities, family strategies to kind of establish like a family wellness time or a family wellness check-in. Could be weekly, bi-weekly, whatever works, but just some time to kind of see how the family members are doing, what's working, what are you doing that's helping, what are some activities you can try, you know, in the future. We always want to, you know, emphasize a strengths and a growth mindset approach. It's okay and necessary to talk about what's going on that hurts and what's going on that's bad. But our goal is always to empower students toward the problem solving and the developing of coping skills. So not to kind of stay down in the hole, but what can we do to, you know, help you climb up when you get down there? Okay, and then it's not one size fits all. It's what works for you. You know, I know Solange and I are very different in some of the ways that we, you know, kind of cope with stress, but we're also very similar in some. So it's wonderful to kind of take a lot of ideas and see what works for you. So on the upcoming slides, I'm going to present some different things you might want to think about. Okay, go ahead, next slide. So the arts, I love this one. The arts are, there's a study at the bottom that you don't have to click on it. But for families, you know, that have a child who may have some, you know, sort of musical inclination or artistic inclination, DIY projects, crafting, theater, any of these things, they're so good. And one of the reasons why healthy activities and fun activities are essential is because it promotes the release of feel-good chemicals in our brain. So it's science. It's not like, you know, it's sort of this hokey thing like, you know, oh yeah, you know, draw or color or paint a picture or play an instrument or listen to music. It's actually, you know, it promotes all of these wonderful things in our brain and our body. And, you know, focusing on an activity like that can be very centering. It can give a child a chance to kind of be self-expressive in a way that feels good to them, that feels safe to them, to be creative. And they can maybe connect with other students who have similar interests, which can build that sense of community. Next slide. Okay, another one, again, music and mood. So There is a study there at the bottom. Again, families, if you get the information and you want to read about it, it's about the benefits of playing an instrument and mental health. I have a student right now who took up guitar during the pandemic, and that's been done wonders per his own report and his parents on just sort of regulating his mood, giving him something positive that's like not on a screen to do. And you know, it's very good for the brain to try new things. So that's that. But the first 4 links here are links to Spotify playlists that were put together by an organization called Sources of Strength, which we use at Yorktown with our students to kind of thematically present them with some music that they can use for calming, for coping, for connecting, or, you know, kind of motivating socially, or creativity. And again, they're just ideas. It's really what works for you. You know, what I listen to might help me, but Solange might hate it, you know. So it's really figuring out yourself, trying some things, and putting together a wellness plan that works for you. Okay, next slide. Okay, again, another idea that we kind of hear, especially, you know, today, thrown around is this idea of mindfulness, meditation, mindful movement. And again, it is science. You know, these types of centering, physical, meditative activities release endorphins in the brain. There are all kinds of benefits to health and well-being. I've included some links there that have been used with students and successfully used with students. There are just a ton of resources, free videos with stretches, with yoga, with mindful meditations, brain breaks, you know, all types of opportunities for students and families to find ways of exploring some centering, grounding, calming, physical activities. Okay, next slide. Another one, on the survey that Solange had presented, I think the apps and online resources was the #1 kind of go-to for kids today, which isn't a surprise because, you know, we're on our phones for literally almost everything anymore. So I put together a list of some apps that teens might find helpful for meditation, mindfulness, and relaxation. They're wonderful to check out. There's a lot of, you know, sort of similarities between them, but you know, Calm, Headspace, Stop, Think, Breathe, Think, all kind of, you know, come with sort of a variety of focuses on meditations, positive thoughts, centering, kind of breathing practices, all of these things. Mood Track Social Diary is great. Kids can actually track their mood throughout the day, or, you know, sort of figure out patterns in triggers and different, you know, kind of things that they felt a certain way about, and then kind of see a pattern emerge, which is really helpful to kind of give yourself some feedback and figure out what to do if you start to see some patterns emerge. Relax Melodies is awesome. There's a lot of really calming and relaxing materials. A lot of people use that one at night. And Colorify is just sort of an opportunity to kind of go at some designs, creations, sort of just, you know, make it what you want it to be, with coloring and creativity. So those are some apps that our students might like. Next slide. The Virtual Calm Room, again, this is just another online resource with a variety of resources built in it. It has a segment for sounds and music. There's some beautiful visual relaxations. Some of them take you under the sea, clouds in the sky. I know personally, I've kept this up on my desktop while I'm doing work, and it's nice if I'm feeling overwhelmed or stressed just to click over to the other window and, you know, watch the penguins at the zoo, you know, for 5 minutes and kind of smile about something going on in nature. It is amazing how just a brief break from what you're doing can really be helpful. Okay, next slide. Okay, so another thing that we hear a lot about and try to teach our students is deep breathing. And breath is essential for life, so regulating that is going to help regulate everything else. So the next, I think, 4 slides are just some gifts that you can, again, keep up on your screen. Students can keep up on their screen, but it guides you kind of in a sort of like gently timed way of when to breathe in and when to breathe out. And again, I found these are really helpful for students to have up on in another window in case they want to take a minute and just do some deep breathing. The visual really helps me because I think the idea of deep breathing sounds great, but then I kind of might get distracted in what's going on around. And it can be hard to keep your eyes closed for a long period of time as well. So these are just some ideas. Go ahead, Emmett, you can maybe just click through. So here's another one. And again, the idea is to inhale and then exhale as the shape collapses. Right. This one's a little more involved. Okay. So the resources for families, I really encourage everyone who wants to receive this PowerPoint to go to this slide and click on the family resources. Emmett, if you wouldn't mind doing that. This is provided by the Sources of Strength organization, which is actually our suicide prevention program that we're using at Yorktown High School. It's wonderful. It gets students to focus on all of these strengths. So the wheel of strengths, the variety of different areas that they might be able to find support through. And this one I love because it was put together specifically when we shut down in the spring for COVID. So it provides families with some great resources for practicing and supporting their students with these strengths in the home setting. Again, another part of this one that I love is there's some conversation prompts that you can talk specifically about things like healthy activities, specifically about mental health. And you can have kind of like that family wellness check-in, that family conversation. There's some games, there's some sort of just, ideas of things that you maybe haven't thought of as a family. And I think this also really normalizes the fact that a lot of people are struggling with this. We know we're all in a really, of course, unprecedented, unpredictable, unsettling, need I go on time. So I'm really, excited about this one. I think there's a lot of great stuff for families in the Sources of Strength within their organization. And we love that we're using the same program at school to support our students. Next slide. Okay, and lastly, I think for our resources, we're all kind of doing a million things at once, which isn't great for our mental health. Too much multitasking can kind of spread us too thin. Like cooking a 5-course meal on one burner is probably not going to end well. For a moment when you feel like you have some mental space to take in some information, here's some podcasts for parents, just in terms of getting ideas of how to talk to your kids. Hearing from other parents about what's going on. They have experts, that they interview, offering kind of some advice and stories, talking about relevant issues, answering questions, and kind of, I think just hearing other people's experiences can be really comforting and validating and helpful. So here's some that have gotten great reviews in the parent community. And next slide. Okay, so kind of, again, we're nearing the home stretch here. We want to kind of look at the picture. When I look at this, what I say is be like dogs. So, you see the person and the dog. And the person they're on the walk together, and the person in their mind is thinking like a billion things, all of the stuff they have to go and do, kind of everything going on in the world. And the dog is just kind of taking in the moment. He's definitely focused on just, hey, I'm outside, sunny day, life is good. So it takes practice to flex this muscle. We are so in the habit of being in that bubble. And I don't know if my pointing is reversed, but I think try to be more like the dog. If you go for a walk, try to actually take in what's going on around you instead of what's going on inside of you. Make it a true mindful moment, a true mindful break. Okay, next slide. All right, and I love this quote, mental health is not a destination, but a process. It's about how you drive, not where you're going. So again, these are skills that we want to build in our students. We don't expect, mental health, to be perfect all the time, because life isn't like that. We all have ups and downs. Some get more extreme than others. And it's really a process. No one likes to see students struggle. No one likes to see a child in pain or feeling hurt. But these are really opportunities to help our kids learn through that, learn coping skills, and also learn how to access additional support that is out there. So it is a process. And we are here to support your students through that. So I think that brings us to the end of our presentation. We really want to thank Dana Milburn and the Yorktown PTA for helping us to kind of put this together and advertise it for us, to support us, and to help the school community see the value of what we're doing, as well as the Parent Resource Center. I've linked some information there so that you can check out what's going on both in the Parent Resource Center and the world of the PTA. I know they're all doing wonderful things to help support our students right now. And if you would like a copy of the slides or have questions that you feel like you'd like to bounce off of us, our contact information, email addresses are there at the bottom of this slide. Okay, so I also want to thank Emmett Conroy, our producer, for helping facilitate us through this event. And a recording will be available in the near future for anyone who may want to go back and rewatch or share it with others. Unfortunately, I'm not sure that we're going to have time to answer specific questions today. I see we've already gone over time, but what we will do is take a look at the questions that if anyone has posed in the Q&A, and we will draft kind of an FAQ about what your questions and concerns are, and we will be sharing that as well. Okay. Well, thank you everyone who joined us today. We're so happy that you're here and in support of us, developing the best ways possible to support our students, both at home and in school at this time.